Greetings to all and sundry. I welcome you into the Lenten space. I thank God for this opportunity to teach His word and share reflections over this time of the Lenten period as we are moving together. Today, I want to share with you on the subject circumcision of the heart. As we come closer to Good Friday and the Easter weekend, it becomes even more and more important that we reflect on the aspect of our salvation and the work of the cross and the work of Christ in our lives. And therefore, I want to talk about circumcision of the heart. When you read Acts chapter 15, verses 1 to 11, Romans chapter 2, verses 25 to 29, and Galatians chapter 5, verses 2 to 7. There you get a discussion around the circumcision, and there was a huge debate between Paul and the Jews and other apostles, with Paul leading the debate or the discussion around circumcision. So please go and read Acts 15, verse 1 to 11, and Romans chapter 2, verse 25 to 29. Circumcision is one of the oldest cultural and religious practices in African and Jewish communities. In this practice, as it is practiced as a sacred rite of passage. The Jews started this religious practice in the 18th century after God made a covenant with Abraham and gave him circumcision as a sign to seal the eternal covenant between God and Abraham. The agreement was that Abraham and all his male descendants will cut off the flesh of their foreskin as a sign of the covenant between God and Abraham. I give you the reference there as Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 to 14. From the point where Abraham and God had an agreement or a covenant, all Jewish men were supposed to circumcise as part of being received into the faith. This cultural and religious practice became the biggest and most important one for the Jews. Unless you were circumcised as a Jewish male, you would not be welcomed into the spaces of other men and into the faith. But the problem was that as centuries went by and different generations of the Jews carried this sacred practice, it lost its sanctity as people now focused on the physical aspect of the practice and lost the spiritual significance of the same practice. All that they focused on is the cutting of the foreskin and forgot everything about the spiritual significance of this rite of passage. The practice became light and lacked any spiritual significance. The actions of those who were circumcised became no different from those that were uncircumcised. It was an empty ritual with no spiritual significance or reverence for God or for the very practice. The leaders of the Jewish faith themselves, i.e. the Pharisees, used the practice to discriminate, exclude, and oppress other people. They failed to ensure that the spiritual aspect and moral behavior of the Jewish people were in line with the spirit of the sacred practice. They did not care or honor God through this practice. They appointed themselves as circumcision police with no moral accountability. They used it to abuse and to abuse power and to exercise authority over others. When that happened, this is where Paul and Barnabas and other apostles of Jesus rose up to challenge the practice of circumcision as it was at that time. Paul in particular was harsh in his criticism of the Jews for seeking to pride themselves with the physical cutting of the flesh that had no sign of a changed heart or behavior. Paul argued with the Jews for burdening the Gentiles with a practice that they and their ancestors did not really bear or even respect. Paul and the other apostles pushed for a circumcision of the heart. They advocated for a spiritual and God-honoring process of salvation or circumcision of the heart for a changed life and behavior rather than a mechanical process of a physical surgery. To this day, my friends, this is a moral challenge for us as believers. As believers, generally speaking, and as church people in particular, we are still trapped in the mechanics of outward processes with no bearing on the spiritual life. We are obsessed with physical rituals and rites of passages that have got no value on the spiritual scale. We are generally focused and obsessed with doing church business and very little spiritual development. Business has taken over spirituality in as far as with regard to church. Ministers, priests, pastors, preachers are all basically church technicians fixing the mechanics of a physical operation of the church. Many have turned into glorified chief executive officers, COOs and CFOs of the church who are doing very little spiritual nurturing and pastoral work. Similarly, church members are also playing church, busy competing with each other in worship, power positions, playing the my uniform is better than yours game, and money games, all such foreskin trivialities. And this is where the church has lost the spiritual aspect and significance of the core business that we have been called to do. We are busy with the foreskin business. The problem is that as we are busy with that outward physical business of the church, the hearts remain stone cold. Behaviors are unchanged. The gravy of true salvation has not filled the heart. There is no transformation of the inner person and the outward behavior. The call then of the Spirit this Good Friday and this Easter is for each of us to bring their hearts forward to be circumcised with the knife of the grace of salvation. Over the COVID-19 period, God allowed the physical properties and operational business of the church to be shut down in order for us to turn our focus on the business of heart, the circumcision of the heart, or the spiritual transformation. It will be very sad, my friends, that after this long and difficult period of a spiritual retreat under lockdown, we still remain essentially practicing professional Christians with no spiritual transformation. The call of this time, the call of this Good Friday and Easter is for us to have a spiritual transformation that starts with the circumcision of the heart through the salvation by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. As we move closer to Good Friday, we think about the cross and reflect more on the meaning of salvation by Jesus Christ. A very significant part of that reflection concerns the saving grace of God in our lives. This is the deep cleaning process of the undeserved love of God in the inner spaces of our lives that cannot be seen or touched. The saving grace process of God is an inward and invisible work of the Spirit in an individual's heart. We have no way to prove or show evidence of this work of the grace in one's life except to receive it by faith. The one that is being saved receives a personal, deep assurance and conviction in their heart that indeed they feel the deep joy and relief, contentment and gratitude in their heart, and therefore testify with their mouth that the heavy burden of the guilt has been removed from their conscience. And that way we know that the heart has been circumcised. The best evidence we have, my friends, of a circumcised heart, it is the changed behavior. It is the moral behavior that has been changed, the ethical behavior that has been transformed. We see the evidence of God's grace, of the work of the Spirit, when people's hearts and lives bear evidence of a changed behavior. And therefore the call of this Good Friday is for you to bring your heart. Bring your heart to the altar of Calvary for God to circumcise your heart through the power of the blade of grace. May you be blessed as you bring your heart to God this Good Friday. Amen.